Yeah, New York Times reported that the U.S. forces struck over 170 Iranian military targets in the past 2 days, and this was reported, just came out from New York Times. And the other point is what then what
Let me at this point explain something. Uh, we shouldn't take this very literally and at face value. Many of the things that they struck have absolutely no significance. First of all, they've struck many decoys, and as they did during the war. So the Iranians have decoys everywhere. Most of the things that are out there are decoys. Second of all, Iran's assets are mostly underground. They only bring them out when necessary. So most of what Iran had, when they say that they destroyed Iran's drone depots are deep underground. So there are no depots on the ground. I mean, they've been, if they were going to destroy our depots, they would have done it during the 40 days of war. So what they do basically is like a piece of metal that was put there to launch a drone. Uh, the Iranians leave it and go back, and they go and bomb that piece of metal. That's that doesn't do any damage to the Iranian armed forces. That's a piece of metal that can be replaced in 2 minutes. So by destroying decoys and pieces of metal and civilian infrastructure, by bombing people's boats, uh, that's not destroying. They can pretend that these are all ships and speedboats that belong to the Revolutionary Guards. But anyone who looks at the images can see that these are mostly boats that belong to ordinary people. And the Americans know that. But they don't care about ordinary people, just like they attack the railway and the bridge near Mashhad in the northeastern of Iran. The Americans are very comfortable with carrying out war crimes. And so what I'm saying is basically we shouldn't take anything that they say seriously. Iranian assets are well protected; they're deep underground. And the Americans were saying the same thing for 40 days during the war, and then after the war, gradually the information came out from the New York Times and the Washington Post to a degree
yeah
that what we were saying beforehand was all true. We were saying that no, Iran's missiles and drones were not damaged. And then weeks later, after the war, the Americans themselves admit that, yes, we are right.
Yeah, as you see in the picture, is not the speedboats that were attacked in this photo that came out just 2 hours ago. It shows that those boats that are used for fishing or something like some sort of activities by civilians.
And they
And
know it. And they know it. No one should imagine for a moment that the Americans got it wrong. No, that was intentional.
yeah. And IRGC, the statement of IRGC says Iran has secured and partially reopened the Strait of Hormuz, bringing traffic back to about 50% of pre war levels, with ships needing IRGC Navy permission to pass through Iranian designated routes. Yeah. And it says that foreigners have no share in this land and in the Strait of Hormuz. It warns that the United States has no right to interfere in the in Hormuz traffic routes, and any American adventurism will face a harsh response and could disrupt the reopening, harming countries that rely on the strait. Do you think that if the escalations continue and maybe the blockade, because we've learned that Iran overnight, at least from the reports that we've learned from Tanker Tracker, it says more than 10 million barrels were exported overnight last night because Iran was fearing the blockade of the United States. Do you see the blockade happening or Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz? What would be that condition? Iran is going to close the Strait of Hormuz, or they're going to wait for the United States to see what the United States is going to do? They're going to come out with the blockade and Iran is going to respond to that.
Well, we have to always remember that Iran never closed the Strait of Hormuz. And it was always open, even during the fighting, during the war, the hot war. Uh, ships that were not from countries that were hostile towards Iran, they would pass through the strait. So Chinese ships, Russian ships, we saw Pakistani ships or Indian ships or Bangladeshi ships and so on. Japanese ships even, they would pass through the strait. The countries that were involved in war against Iran, like the Saudis, the Emiratis, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, in the Persian Gulf, they were the ones who were not allowed to use the strait for obvious reasons. They were waging war against Iran. In fact, last night and the night before, the United States was using their airspace. It was using their bases. It was using their assets to strike Iran. So these 5 countries are involved. Qatar, deeply involved. Kuwait, deeply involved. Saudi Arabia, all of them. So, but even now, like in the past, Iran has not shut the Strait of Hormuz, but it will not allow the Americans to control the strait. That was something that Iran made clear. It was the Americans that effectively shut the Strait of Hormuz when they imposed the siege. But even then, Iran allowed ships from countries that were friendly, except for on days when there was heavy fighting, to leave the strait. So right now, the Iranians have not shut down the strait. But if the Americans impose a siege, then that will change things. Then the flow of traffic will go down immensely, and the global economic crisis will become more imminent.
Here is the new footage, Professor Marandi, coming out and showing that the same thing, that proving what you've just said about the Americans hitting the civilian boats in close to the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, here you see the new footage that shows that they hit the civilian boats. And do you think, Professor Marandi, that with the new activities that are happening, because we had some reports that Iran is sending forces to the Iraqi border, and it seems that there are some sort of activities on the part of the Iraqi Kurdistan. Can you hear me, Professor Marandi?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Eh, and even we had Iran, one of the Iranian commanders talking about making a buffer zone, a security zone at the border with Iraqi Kurdistan. Is that going to happen? And how serious is that for Iran?
I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen or if that's just a threat to make sure that the Iraqi government uh, enforces its authority, and so that the Kurdish government in the northern Iraq enforces its authority over the border area, because these terrorist groups have bases alongside the border, and the Iraqi government knows this, and the Kurdish government in Arbil knows this quite well. The Americans fund them, the Europeans support them, the Israelis, of course, help them, and they are tolerated by these authorities. So the Iranians are striking them nowadays, as we've seen during the last few months. They've been striking them with missiles, but mostly drones. And now I think that this is a threat that either should be taken seriously, or that it may be enforced, or that it's basically for now an attempt to push the Kurdish authorities in northern Iraq to bring an end to the presence of these organized terrorists alongside its borders. So it may be that Iran is planning to carry this out, or it may be that the Iranians are saying this to make sure that they change to force them to change their policy, but that if they don't do so, then they may move in. That's what, unlike Turkey, which has bases all over Iraq and Syria, even though the Iraqis and the Syrians, have never approved of it, the Iranians do not have any bases in northern Iraq, not a single base, not a single soldier. So Iran doesn't want to do this. But at the same time, Iran will not tolerate the Kurdish government in northern Iraq to collaborate with the Israeli regime to destabilize northwestern Iran in collaboration with with the Israeli regime at a time when the United States is attacking Iran. And we've seen an increase in terrorist attacks both near the Kurdish areas, but also near the Pakistani border as well, where the Takfiri groups that are supported by Western intelligence agencies have carried out a couple of assassinations in the last few weeks.
Donald Trump yesterday said that the Turkish government helped them more than many countries in the region and outside of the region. What is the perception on the part of Iranians, the way that Turkey may help the United States during the war?
Well, Turkey has always helped the United States in its policies in our region. Turkey, under Erdogan, I mean, Trump said that Erdogan is more faithful than other leaders whom he expected more of, meaning implying the Europeans. So he's saying that Erdogan has been better for Trump than the European leaders. And that is a very damning statement, especially since the Turkish people are completely against the policies of the United States and they oppose the Israeli regime. But we've discussed this before. Throughout the genocide, Erdogan has continued to transport oil from Baku to his business partner in Israel, Netanyahu, to fuel the genocide. And during the oil crisis, that oil continued to flow. As we speak, it continues to flow. And statements like this by Trump, of course, make things even more painful to see. Our expectations of Turkey are that they would listen to their own people, and that they would cut off diplomatic ties, they would cut off business ties, and they would sincerely show support for the Palestinian people and the Lebanese people and the Syrian people, the real support. Turkey under Erdogan took part in the circus in Egypt, where they imposed a ceasefire on Gaza that was completely one-sided. And Trump there too said that Erdogan has always been there whenever I needed him, and Erdogan put his hand on his chest, which is very meaningful in our culture. So it's with great disappointment because under Najmuddin Erbakan, the father of the rise of the Islamic movement in Turkey, the trajectory was very different. And when he was sidelined, he did not look at Erbakan favorably at all. And if he had remained in power, and Turkish intelligence and the deep state and the West had not collaborated to sideline him and water down the movement, Turkey would have been I'm absolutely certain that Turkey would have had very different policies today, and the situation for the Israeli regime would have been very, very, very difficult.
Part of the calculation in the Strait of Hormuz is Europeans, and it seems that Europe, on one side, you see the vice chancellor of Germany saying that the stupid war is bringing a lot of problem for the economy of Germany. They couldn't improve their economy because of the war, and it says that it puts the blame on Donald Trump. On the other hand, you see Europeans somehow cooperating with the United States in the region, because part of that campaign of putting pressure on Oman, which was one of the main games of Rubio's visit to the West Asia. He did that. He came, and the statement coming out. Then you see Europeans coming in and talking with Omani government. What is that, and what do they want to achieve with Oman? And is that going to be militarily acceptable, or practically able, are they going to be able to practically change some sort of conditions in the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, obviously, Oman has been badly intimidated, and it has been forced to obey the United States and let the Americans open a corridor for themselves in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Europeans, their presence too, is a part of this broader project of intimidating Oman and also gaining a foothold in the Strait of Hormuz. That will not happen. First of all, the Americans will not get that foothold. If the Americans even start a ground operation, ultimately they'll be defeated. They can come in, take parts of the mainland, take islands, but they'll be defeated and they'll be expelled. The Europeans have no military capability at all to wage war against Iran, and their technology does not compare to that of the United States. Their military experience does not compare, and their economies are just a shadow of what they once were, and they're moving towards deindustrialization, especially Germany, because of their conflict with Russia and of course their collaboration with Washington against Iran in the Persian Gulf region for the past few decades. So, and especially since the war in Ukraine is escalating, the Europeans have no extra money or resources to open a second front against Iran. And that's why Trump has been so unhappy with them. He's been much more happy with Erdogan, sadly, than he's been with his NATO partners. And that's why the Secretary General of NATO, whenever he meets Trump, he has to immediately start licking his boots because Trump is not happy with the Europeans. So I don't think anyone in Iran takes the French or the British or anyone else in Europe that wants to flex their muscles in the Persian Gulf seriously.
Professor Marandi, today we've learned from the defense minister, the Greek defense minister, and he's asking why is Iran attacking? Why has Iran attacked Saudi Arabia? Why has Iran attacked UAE or Qatar? And this is the country that somehow is cooperating with the United States in their attacks on Iran. And he's asking these simple questions. And do you think how deep is this sort of ignorance in that part of the argument? I would say they're on the part of the United States, but they're not that deep about what's going on in the West Asia, or they're not going to. What is your understanding of these people or these governments which are part of the war?
I think they know that they're lying. I think they know what the reality is. That these countries, alongside the Europeans, the Secretary General of NATO basically admitted, as he was, licking Trump's boots, that the Europeans actually helped a lot with the illegal war against Iran. So they have a lot of blood on their hands, he says. He admits with great joy. But they know this. They know what the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the Emiratis did. Without these countries, there would not have been a war against Iran. So these countries are complicit in war. It's clear as day. But they're counting on the ignorance of their population by saying that Iran started this or Iran expanded the war. Just like now, they'll say that the Iranians are starting this by just targeting ships in the Strait of Hormuz, without providing the context. And of course, many naive Westerners will still believe their nonsense. It's not like it was before, but still there's a segment of Western society that still believes that the Israelis are the good guys and that the Palestinian children deserve to be massacred. You do have that, that's why you have a segment of Americans who still support Israel, or a segment of Europeans who still support the Israeli regime. So he knows this. He knows how. I mean, the defense minister obviously knows what role these countries have played in assaulting Iran and destroying schools and hospitals and so on. But again, it's just basically to manage the public perception.
There were reports of 2 attacks on 2 bridges, one between Iran and Mashhad, the other one in Aqala in Golestan. which two are of particular importance because one of them is connecting Tehran to Mashhad. We know that today is the funeral procession in Mashhad going on, and the other one is the connection. The railway passes over the bridge in Aqala in Golestan that goes, it connects Iran to China and to Kazakhstan, then China. So these attacks were done by the United States, or there were some sort of internal, forces or agents doing this.
I've not heard of anything except for the news that the Americans have struck these bridges, and it just shows that the Americans are not. The issue is not the nuclear program. The issue is Iran. They want to break Iran, and that was the project from the beginning, and that is the objective today, because that's what the Zionists want. So striking schools is a part of that. Striking hospitals is a part of that. Striking apartment block, and we've had a lot of independent journalists in Iran during the funeral ceremonies, and some of them are mutual friends of ours, and they've been doing reports from these destroyed hospitals and destroyed schools and destroyed apartment blocks and so on. This has nothing to do with the nuclear program. This has to do with weakening the Iranian people, breaking the Iraqi people. Why do they support these Kurdish terrorists in northern Iraq? Because why are they supporting the Takfiris alongside the border with Pakistan? It's obvious. Why were they supporting the armed insurrection a few months ago? This is to undermine Iran, and the war itself was to break Iran. And targeting a key railway line in Iran that links Iran to Central Asia and links the capital to Mashhad, the second most important city in the country, is obvious. It wants to intimidate ordinary Iranians, those who are going to the funeral, but it also wants to disrupt Iran's relationship with other countries, and it wants to break Iran's capability to remain independent and to for the government to be able to govern society effectively.
Yeah. Israeli media just reported that preparations are underway for an immediate escalation. If they start joining, they're cooperating with the United States, but if they come out in full and come out and attack in Iran again, do you think that Hezbollah and maybe Yemen would join the war?
Yes, I think that Iraq, the resistance in Iraq too, will join the war in Yemen. And this will be the entire axis of resistance. But if we have an all-out war and they start destroying Iranian critical infrastructure, the Israeli regime's critical infrastructure will be destroyed, and then critical infrastructure of the countries in these Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf will also be destroyed. And we are in the height of summer now, and the humidity and heat in these countries is through the roof. So if the United States wants these countries to collapse and for the entire population of the Arabian Peninsula countries to leave, and for these regimes to permanently collapse, the way forward is to expand war.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Did you hear me, or did I get cut off again? Sorry.
You're back.
Yeah. What did I say last?
Yeah, it was just cutting away. You were talking about the Iranian response together with Iraqis and Yemenis all together.
And I was saying that in the Arabian Peninsula today, the height of summer, if escalation, Iran will destroy Israeli critical infrastructure if Iran's critical infrastructure is attacked, but it will also destroy the critical infrastructure of these regimes in the Persian Gulf. And being in the height of summer and in a bunch of desert countries.
Yeah, it seems that you lost Professor Marandi. He's going to be back because I want to ask him about the border right now, because there are many activities not only in Iraqi Kurdistan. We have it in the southern part of Iran, in the in the at the border with Pakistan as well. These are the escalations that are happening, and basically it seems some sort of fear exists in Iran today because of they think that the United States is trying to do some sort of ground invasion. And let's see, yeah, Professor Marandi is here with us. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
Nima.
you're back.
There's nothing
You're
I
back.
can do about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just saying that if the United States and the Israeli regime expand the war, then start striking Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran will destroy the critical infrastructure of the Israeli regime, but it will also destroy the critical infrastructure of these 5 countries in the Persian Gulf. And we're in the height of summer, with the heat and humidity in the Persian Gulf. If their critical infrastructure is destroyed, these countries will collapse. They won't exist anymore, and the people will have to leave. So it is really up to these countries in the United States to think carefully about the steps forward. We will definitely not be the ones to lose the most. And of course, this will lead to global economic depression as well. So the smart thing for the United States to do is to yank the leash of Netanyahu very hard, and to back down and implement the MOU. Otherwise, this is not like the nuclear deal. The Iranians have the ability to make life very difficult for Trump.
do you think that Donald Trump, after watching the funeral of the late supreme leader of Iran, he somehow felt he has to do something about it? He has to attack Iran. He has to, somehow influence the whole atmosphere in the region by these attacks. What is your understanding of that? It seems to me, I feel this way, that Donald Trump is somehow feeling he has to do something about it, because he was talking about 45,000 people were killed. These are, and you see these huge crowd coming out in support of the supreme leader of Iran. And it's just destroying all the rhetorics that you've been trying to build. And this is huge for Donald Trump and his sort of ego.
Yes, I think that his response to the funeral in Tehran, and that was just the beginning. Then we had Qom, and then we had Najaf, and the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, and now in Mashhad. I mean, the funerals are all extraordinary and unprecedented in the world, and each one of them is a phenomenon in itself. So his reaction was very interesting. Although then he tried to fix it by saying, "Oh, maybe I don't know, these tears were fake or whatever." But it was clear that he was very surprised, and that shows the strength of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It shows that it's people power that stands behind the Islamic Revolution and the axis of resistance. And the same is true in Iraq, as we saw in the funeral there, because that is a show of force in itself. That those millions of people in Iraq who took part in the funeral were saying that our cause is the same cause. Our road, our path is the same path. Our leader is the same person as the Iranians, as Hezbollah. So that's a huge show of force, and that makes the U.S. position more difficult to maintain in Iraq, but also across the region. So that could have been part of it. I was also told that the Americans have had casualties that they have not announced. There was a strike in Kuwait where apparently a number of American soldiers, the Iranians believe, were killed, and also an American ship was hit. I don't know how badly it was damaged, but the belief is that these together have made him go berserk.
Yeah.